What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here, and back to review Avatar: Fire and Ash, the third in James Cameron's epic sci-fi trilogy. A movie where I must admit from the word go, I kind of wearily dragged myself to the theater to see the movie out of a feeling of obligation as opposed to genuine excitement. However, even though I've got a laundry list of complaints about Avatar: Fire and Ash, there were some scenes that I liked, so I'll say on the whole, I liked the movie better than I expected to, but I fell well short of falling in love with the movie the way I used to with James Cameron's movies back in the 1980s and the 1990s, because I was part of the lucky sperm club that was born in 1976. So I was a small child when the Terminator hit the big screen, and then Aliens, and then The Abyss, then T2, then True Lies. And that hot streak is one of the best hot streaks of any filmmaker during my lifetime. And to be perfectly blunt, there hasn't been a movie directed by James Cameron since True Lies that I liked as much as the films in that 5-movie hot streak. However, if the goal of any individual filmmaker is to make movies that will last, that will withstand the test of time, but at the same time earning you enough financial and creative autonomy where you can make movies however you want for the rest of your life, well then James Cameron, he's accomplished every single objective known to human civilization. And the fact that I don't like Titanic and the fact that I don't like the Avatar trilogy, who the hell cares? James Cameron, he's one of those rare innovators where he's managed to will into existence through hard work and dedication and determination a world where he can tell whatever story he likes. It's just bewildering to me that he would tell this story 3 times. But to be fair, if you like the previous 2 Avatar movies, you're going to like this Avatar movie. And if you're bored by the previous 2 Avatar movies, you'll be bored by this one. This movie's 3 hours and 17 minutes long, but in spite of the fact that it felt like 6 hours instead of 3, there were a few scenes tucked away in the middle where I was like, okay, this is James Cameron. This is the guy who gave us all those incredible movies that I grew up on. But then sadly, they just kind of vanished like ash, like the ash in the title. But in order to call attention to the one major ingredient that I really liked, let me first read the synopsis from IMDb. Jake and Natiri's family grapples with grief after Netayam's death, encountering a new aggressive Na'vi tribe, the Ash People, who are led by the fiery Varang as the conflict on Pandora escalates and a new moral focus emerges. And let me just skip to the good part that I want to discuss. When Varang is on the screen, I sat up and paid attention. She's an absolutely vicious character. She's an incredibly charismatic character. She's not one of those lame, misunderstood villains that's constantly looking into their navel like we see in so many big-budget blockbusters these days. She wants to conquer and kill and rule and basically just eviscerate anyone who stands in her path. And without sounding like a total creepo, there's a strange sex appeal to her character because every time she's on screen, she basically sways her hips like 6 inches in every direction every time she moves. And even though I'm not remotely attracted to the Na'vi in any way, shape, or form, if anything, I find the Na'vi to be kind of ridiculous in appearance and always have. But anytime the camera pushes in for a close-up and we really get to see Varang cut loose, the movie becomes quite enjoyable, especially when she starts interacting with the Colonel, played by Stephen Lang. But this is just storytelling 101. If you want a great epic action-adventure movie in a sci-fi context, you need amazing villains, and that's something that James Cameron has understood more or less throughout his entire career. Terminator has great villains. Aliens sure as shit has great villains. The Abyss has really interesting villains. T2 has great villains. And True Lies has great villains. And you can't have a great hero unless they have a great villain to kind of lock horns with or to measure up against. And this movie absolutely provides some fantastic villains. However, there's a caveat, and I'm about to say something pretty critical, which might be spoiler light. Varang more or less just vanishes from like the last hour or hour and a half in the movie, where you see her in action and she's screaming and she's fighting and she's doing that sort of thing, but she's no longer having big, meaningful exchanges with the other characters. And I think that is the major Achilles heel of this movie. It'd be like making a movie like Star Wars, but having Darth Vader just vanish for like the last hour. It's like, well, wait a second, I kind of like Darth Vader. Maybe someone should fight him or have a conversation with him or something like that. You don't let the most fascinating character in the story kind of fade into the background and replace her with all the most boring characters you can possibly imagine. What really weighs down this movie and makes it feel absolutely endless is the fact that it's got this enormous cast of characters that's been accumulating over the last 3 movies, and James Cameron tries to give a meaningful arc to each and every single one of them, even if they're the most boring character that you could possibly imagine. Dr. Garvin by Jermaine Clement, nobody gives a fuck about him, and yet he's got an arc. General Ardmore, played by Edie Falco, an actress that I love, no one gives a fuck about her character, but they try to give her a meaningful arc. And the list just goes on and on and on with these bland, one-dimensional, forgettable characters where if you were to put a shotgun to my head and say, name these characters' names and like which actors played them, I'd be like, can I check IMDb first? I mean, these characters are as forgettable as you can possibly imagine. And what's really missing from this movie are the kind of funny and or sexy characters that James Cameron used to be drawn to in all of his best movies. Like take any of the Marines and Aliens, they're all incredibly dynamic characters. Even if they're just kind of like a one-dimensional character, that one dimension is insanely cool or funny or fucking badass. Or take like Bill Paxton in any of the James Cameron movies he's in. He's absolutely fucking hysterical in all of them. Or Linda Hamilton in that kind of muscular sex appeal of T2. Or Jamie Lee Curtis in that just completely overt sex appeal in True Lies. James Cameron back in the day, who knows, maybe this is due to the influence of his collaborators, but he used to inject a lot more vitality into his characters. Whereas these characters, especially amongst the Na'vi, they're incredibly earnest, and there is nothing more boring than an overly earnest character. We're living during a time where we're suffering from an epidemic of overly earnest characters and overly earnest movies. But this movie's probably got 20 or 25 speaking roles, both amongst the Na'vi as well as amongst the sky people, the human beings, where you're like, please stop talking, please stop adding to the already very, very long running time. And the main poster child for this problem is the character Spider, played by Jack Champion. And Jack Champion is a very athletic young actor, and he's physically fit. You can believe that he's running around the woods and swimming all day. He can't act. He can't act at all. And he's given hundreds of lines of dialogue. Some of the most meaningful scenes in the entire movie, he has to carry the weight of those interactions as he's trying to figure out what kind of relationship he wants to have with the two characters played by Sam Worthington and Stephen Lang. And obviously, since the beginning of this trilogy, Sam Worthington and Stephen Lang, their two characters, have been the real feature attraction when it comes to the conflict at the core of this story. And in theory, it's an interesting dynamic having a character who's trying to figure out whose son does he want to be. However, Jack Champion can act. And at a certain point, it got very easy for me to just start rooting for the bad guys and just hoping that they would kill everybody in sight, except for obviously the lovely Varang played by Una Chaplin, who by far and away is the most interesting part of this movie. But it's incredible seeing just how boring and lifeless a lot of really good actors can be in the hands of James Cameron when making a movie this way, like Sigourney Weaver. Sigourney Weaver is a living legend. I've been watching her movies my entire life, from Alien to Ghostbusters to Aliens.
Get away from her, you bitch!
Love Sigourney Weaver. I've got nothing but the utmost respect and admiration for her. But in this story, she plays Kiri. Everybody in this movie has the exact same name, like Kiri or Neytiri. It's can we have some variety in the names where there's not just a bunch of vowels? But Sigourney Weaver's character Kiri is a young woman, but she's got an old woman's voice, and it's just distracting and weird when you're hearing like a late teen or early 20-something talking to their parents, where she sounds decades older than them. And I know they mess with her voice a bit, trying to make it sound younger. You can tell it's Sigourney Weaver, and we all know that Sigourney Weaver, how old is Sigourney Weaver? She's got to be getting close to 80 at this point. And I'm seeing here that she's 76 years old, and it's great that she and James Cameron are still working together after all these decades. I just think it's weird having an older woman playing a young girl. But let me tap the brakes a bit and call attention to a few more of the movie's strengths. So if you're interested in the process behind the making of this movie, I'm going to strongly recommend people hunt down an interview that James Cameron did with Matthew Bellany on the podcast The Town. It was a 2-part interview. And James Cameron, he's much more interesting as a person in that interview than any of his recent movies are, because even though his movies have gotten kind of bland, he remains a pretty fiery, adversarial personality. And that's the way I like him. And he also talks about how he used to be a big-time asshole in the 80s and early 90s. It's probably why he made better movies, because he just didn't give a fuck about being nice to people. He just wanted to make art for art's sake. But let me not get distracted. When making the Avatar movies, I think a lot of times people assume that they're made the way that a lot of animation is made, where you bring in an actor, put him in a soundproof booth, give him a cup of coffee, have him read a few lines, and send them home. That is not how the Avatar movies were shot. He had actors on sound stages for 18 months shooting this fucking movie, so anytime you see actors interacting or giving a facial expression, that is the real actor's performance just being enhanced by all this digital technology. And there are a few scenes that I must admit were genuinely awe-inspiring when it came to the technology being employed to tell the story. And this all goes back to my character that I love and adore, Varang, played by Una Chaplin, because for me the most interesting scene of the movie by far is when Colonel Quaritch comes to visit her tribe by this giant volcano. They live in a whirl of ash because their entire land and their forests and their village and everything was destroyed by fire and lava a long time ago. Basically, the tribe has decided to turn their backs on Awa and embrace the fire as opposed to being afraid of the fire. In any case, they're living out in isolation, and Quaritch comes to see them, and he wants to form an alliance, and he's offering them, weapons and communications and all that kind of stuff. And they go into her tent to basically talk about this possible alliance. And the special effects in the scene are unlike anything I've ever seen. There's no fighting, there's no gunplay, no flying, nothing big. But if you look carefully at her face and the way the shadows are landing on her head, it looks so real and so physical and so tactile. You feel like you can reach out and touch it. And I don't think I've ever seen digital effects look that realistic, where the way the light is interacting with the skin and the way the shadows interacting and the way the light is reflecting off the characters. I was like, I am in awe of what you've achieved. And it also helps when you have great performances combined with the great special effects, because special effects, they don't do you any good if you don't have great performances to go along with them. And that's oftentimes the big problem with this movie. Big on spectacle, but empty on soul, empty on character, except for in that one scene where, like, can we just hang out in this little hut for the rest of the movie and watch these two evil, diabolical people, talking all kinds of shit? Because that's when the movie really came to life, where both the technique and the story and the characters all kind of like, we're firing on all cylinders. But where the movie is not firing on all cylinders is during a lot of the action scenes, because a lot of these characters, we truly do not care if they live or die. And this movie's got tons of action. It probably has more action than the previous two movies put together, where it's like a series of chases and escapes and battles and more chases and escapes, and it's just action, action, action. But who cares about action if you're not emotionally invested in the fates of the characters? And let me ask a genuine, sincere question. Have you ever been to a Halloween party where somebody's dressed up as one of the Na'vi? Or have you ever met a little kid where all they can talk about is wanting to watch more Avatar movies, or spending the entire movie drawing in their Avatar coloring books while watching the movies? Like, growing up in the 80s and 90s, people would talk about the Terminator. And like, I was terrified of the Terminator before I even saw the Terminator. I went to school, I must have been in like second grade, and some kids were talking about the end when they see the Terminator rise up from the wreckage of the truck and starts limping after Linda Hamilton. And I was like, I was getting petrified, but also fascinated, and saw the movie soon thereafter. Or take Aliens. I didn't see Aliens until after my dad had described a lot of the best scenes to me. And he was describing the scene where Bill Paxton is looking at his little radar, and he can see all the xenomorphs coming in, and he knows that basically they should be in the room, but they can't see them. And the way he was describing the scene, I was like, that sounds so fucking cool. And it's it's in the trailer. It's a great scene in the movie. But people used to talk about James Cameron movies in a hushed state of awe. Like, I can remember summer before my freshman year in high school, just sitting around with a couple friends, quite literally talking about like what it would be like to experience the end of the world, because we'd seen a brief snapshot of it in Terminator 2, and it was just profound, and it was like a big eye-opener. And these movies were just so much fun to discuss endlessly. And the behind-the-scenes documentaries about the making of any of those first 5 movies can keep you very deliriously entertained for many hours on end, on top of just watching the movies over and over and over again. I've never bumped into somebody in my life of any age who's like, dude, we got to talk about that scene in Avatar. That scene, it really fucking blew my mind. These movies are just like, they are empty spectacle. And while there might be great scenes and great details where James Cameron reminds us, only James Cameron knows how to stage battles on an epic scale. But in the end, I would rather watch clunkier action scenes or more inexpensive action scenes with great characters, as opposed to insanely expensive action scenes with empty vessels. And who knows what the budget for this movie might be. Going back to that interview with Matthew Bellany on The Town, James Cameron at one point, I can't remember exactly how he described it, but when asked how much this movie cost, he basically said like an epic fuck ton or an epic shit ton. And he said the movie needs to make even more than an epic fuck ton of money in order for Disney to make their money back. And he said it in jest, but obviously there's a lot of money on the line, and a lot of this cost can be amortized across all 3 movies. But this movie is easily one of the most expensive movies ever made. But at least you see that money on the screen. But once again, it's like whether you spent $500 million or $700 million, whatever the final price tag might be, I would have preferred if they'd have spent more money on the screenplay, hiring really good writers to deliver like the coolest science fiction concept in history. Because the story for this movie, it's basically the exact same fucking story that we've already seen in the previous 2 movies, just with a few new bells and whistles and a few more variations, because now we spend a hell of a lot more time with the children of the Sullys, all of whom have about as much personality as your average, like brick in a wall gathering moss. Also, in that same interview, Matthew Bellany asked James Cameron about formats of movies and what is his preferred format when watching any movie on the big screen. And obviously, the 2 big rival premium formats out there these days are IMAX and Dolby. And basically, James Cameron said when he wants to be enveloped in the movie or kind of consumed by the movie or absorbed by the movie, he prefers IMAX, and he likes to have the edges of the screen going beyond the peripheral vision. But if he wants to appreciate the contrast of the lights and darks and really appreciate like the beauty of the image, he prefers the Dolby format. So put that in your pipe and smoke it the next time you're considering which premium format to waste extra money on. But James Cameron, who obviously knows a thing or two about the technical side of filmmaking, prefers Dolby. But the big looming question is, to what degree will this movie be successful? Will it sustain the momentum of making more than $2 billion like the previous two movies? Or will people finally say, you know what, we just saw an Avatar movie a couple years ago. We've kind of had our fill. We don't need any more. I really don't know. Like the Avatar phenomenon is one of the most bewildering things that I've ever experienced, where these movies make all the money that you could possibly imagine, and nobody talks about them. And no filmmakers ever say, you know what, when I saw Avatar, I wanted to become a filmmaker and make movies just like James Cameron. Like nobody's tried to replicate the technology and the experience of Avatar. It's almost like ships passing in the night, where there's really not another phenomenon like it in all of movies, because when it comes to like big popular dinosaur movies or big popular superhero movies or other kinds of escapist entertainment, they spawn all sorts of imitators. And speaking of other forms of escapist entertainment, they showed like a 1-minute little teaser for Avengers Doomsday before the movie. Dude, what a non-event, what a nothing burger of a teaser, just showing Steve Rogers like holding a baby and riding on a motorcycle. I was like big fucking deal. And apparently they're gonna have like more of those over the next couple weeks. I could not give less of a fuck about a teaser where Steve Rogers just holds a baby and rides away on a motorcycle. It's like, show him throwing a shield or show him doing something, but give me something I can like sink my teeth into. But let's not get sidetracked talking about the MCU. But there are a lot of filmmakers who saw Aliens back in the day and decided, oh shit. Like you can see, like throughout the 90s, there were just legions of science fiction movies that were basically copying like the feel and the atmosphere and the aesthetic of that movie. And for basically a decade after Aliens came out, nearly every trailer that you saw was stealing music from the movie in order to kind of jack up the intensity of their trailers. Like these were incredibly influential movies with moments that live in our culture and our collective imagination forever. Whereas these Avatar movies just are like a big, yawning void where they're incredibly beautiful and expensive, but totally hollow and soulless and empty. And the question now is, what does James Cameron want to do with the rest of his time on this planet? He's in his 70s, he's very healthy, he's very driven. Who knows, he might make movies for 20 more years if he wishes to. But he's achieved total financial and artistic autonomy and independence. He can do anything he wants. Why keep making these movies, unless it's just a situation where he's got nothing left to say? Although he recently acquired the rights to a book called The Devils by author Joe Abercrombie, which is a really cool medieval fantasy epic adventure story. If he wanted to try a different genre, fantasy, like dark adult fantasy, I would be totally down for it. But yeah, I'm praying to baby Jesus and the movie gods, please, no more Avatar movies. But let's try to close out this video with a few positives. Toward the end of the movie, as all the heroes are kind of marshaling their forces and looking for reinforcements in the natural world from other tribes and that sort of thing, there are moments where I started to get that old familiar feeling of like goosebumps on my forearms. But what's really missing from the scenes is a big, iconic score. James Cameron used to have like the best scores in the business. This score is pretty uneventful and forgettable. But there were a few scenes where like, all right, I'm starting to feel the emotion. And maybe there's a little bit more sex appeal in this. And once again, I feel weird even mentioning that because nobody wants to think about the Na'vi having sex. But there's a lot of side boob in this movie. A lot of times you're like, are they naked or not? But there's a lot of like butt cheeks and side boob and a lot of scantily clad aliens running around the entire movie. But if you're that one person on the internet that's always frantically looking for erotic imagery featuring the Na'vi, Avatar Fire and Ash might be your favorite of the three. But I just remembered something that I have to call attention to. And I mentioned before how I wanted to end this video on a positive note, but I'm going to have to break that promise and end it on a negative note because this is a mild spoiler, or actually major spoiler. It's just spoiler section. All bets are off. But in the first like 5 minutes of the movie, you probably hear the word bro 150 times. They're two characters where they begin and end every sentence with the word bro. And I have a pretty much like a blanket policy that no sentence that has ever mattered ever has begun or ended with the word bro. It's a little bit like the word dude back in the 1980s. Like, dude, I'm so wasted. Dude, I'm so fucked up. Dude, I know. Dude. And we would just use it over and over and over again. meaningless word, and we just we ran it right into the ground, and dude eventually had to go bye-bye because we overused it. Or it's like hanging out with a couple where they begin and end every sentence with the word babe. Like, babe, can you go to the store for me, babe? Sure, babe, what do you need, babe? And it's like, oh my God, like, I hope you both burn in hell. I'm never coming over ever again. This movie uses bro a lot. And you can tell James Cameron, who's in his 70s, is trying really hard to sound cool and young. But like, imagine if somebody said, bro, I think I found the cure for cancer. But like, you know what? I don't believe you. Or, bro, I came up with an investment strategy that's going to earn you $1 million. But like, you know what? I doubt it. You sound like a fucking idiot. Like, it is the most overused word of the modern age. And obviously, I am old and grumpy, and I don't like it when new slang emerges. But at least, like, try to have some variety. It's like brohan or brotatorship, or just like variety is the spice of life. And words that get overused, they just become meaningless. They become dead freight. And so, shame on you, James Cameron, for littering the first 5 minutes of this movie with more uses of the word bro than any other movie in movie history. And that really put a sour taste in my mouth and got me off on the wrong foot, where I was like, I don't care what you show me over the next 3.5 hours. I'm going to hate all of it if you keep using the word bro. So on that note, bro, decide for yourself if you want to see Avatar, Fire and Ash. Once again, these movies are kind of review-proof, and they're kind of pointless to even discuss. I find the career of James Cameron absolutely riveting and fascinating. He's one of our greatest like practitioners of like big-budget, blockbuster entertainment of the last 40 or 50 years. It's just a shame that he's kind of squandered his incredible gifts on this trilogy over the last 16 years. But what the hell? He gave us 5 bangers back in the day, and he made my childhood a much happier one. So I'm always going to be in his debt until the end of time. Love and adore James Cameron. I just don't love and adore anything past True Lies. But let's say hypothetically you've never seen any of the Avatar movies, but you're interested in this kind of story. My advice would be hunt down Michael Mann's early 90s movie, The Last of the Mohicans, because it's got a very similar dynamic where you have indigenous people going to war with a technologically superior force, and you have one character who's a man of both worlds kind of caught in the middle. It is one of the coolest historical epics ever made, and it's proof that you can do an amazing historical epic without having an excessive runtime. So on that kind of mixed message note, I'm going to bring this video to a close. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Bro, to like, share, and subscribe, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards. Bro.